now have a panel discussion, and to facilitate that is Dr. KENDI GUANTAI. Now, KENDI is the University Dean for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion here in Leeds, an Associate Professor of Corporate Communications Practice, a member of the University Council, and Trustee Board Chair for Action Aid UK, which is a leading international NGO which works for the rights of women and girls whilst responding to humanitarian crises and conducting research to influence policy. KENDI is also one of the university leads on decolonizing the curriculum and has research interest in indigenous and decolonial pedagogies. So shall we welcome KENDI to facilitate the next session?
Thank you, Sally. So she tells me we are running behind time, which is not good news for me because those who know me know I can talk for England. But it's a good thing it's not me speaking. We've got a panel, so maybe we'll try and keep it to time as much as we can. So I'd like to welcome our panelists, YOSELIN, Maria, OLUWASEUN, Georgie, and KAMYAR. So I will let them introduce themselves as we go through the first question of this particular section. So the discussion is navigating the academy as a minoritized person, lessons and opportunities. We have had a lot today. Thank you, Brightness. That was amazing. I think people would have carried on. There were lots and lots of questions and a lot of intrigue. And I think this, you've given us a lot to build on in this particular section. So I have borrowed some community agreements. We are talking about building communities today from Dr. David, I forget his name, David Morris. So every time he has a session, he has some community agreements, and I'd like to maybe share those with you so that we can agree in terms of how we want to be in this session. So the first one, come prepared to every gathering, ready to engage, dialogue, and study together. Are we okay to do that? Good. So we recognize the dignity and respect the personhood of each human being, spirit of Ubuntu. We dialogue in order that we might understand. Understanding and not agreement is the chief aim of our time together. We do not have to agree, but we can disagree respectfully, okay? Every question is a good question, and every answer is multiple. We practice conversational justice, right? Some of us do tend to take much more time than other people do. Let's be aware of that. And let's be aware that in the time that we have together, we would like to hear the voices of everybody. Not every question will have an answer, but it might require us to live a little in the question. We are allowed to change our minds. No position is static. We are ever-changing multiplicities of one. And be open to the possibility of the new. How does that sound? Sounds great? Fabulous. So I will invite our panelists. I'll start with YOSELIN, working our way this way, to share our stories. So let us know, introduce yourself, your name, what you do currently, and your story of how you got to where you are right now. Is that okay? Yes? Perfect. And we'll keep it maybe 3 minutes max each. I hope that works.
Test.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Yeah, I guess, yes. Okay, so my name is YOSELIN BENITEZ ALFONSO, and I am Associate Professor in Plant Science here at the University of Leeds. I am originally from Cuba, and I grew up there, did the first years of university there, and then moved to Cordoba, where I finished my degree and did my PhD. I was basically in the picture of the graduation in my PhD because I was the only Black student in the University of Cordoba. So yeah, I have quite experience there in Spain. From there, I moved to the United States, which was a much more diverse community in Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories in New York. And there I got good papers, good postdoctoral experience, and then moved on to the Young Innes Center, which is a center for excellence in plant science here in Norwich, in the UK. So that's what brought me to the UK. And then I took the opportunity that I saw and advertised the position for research fellow here at the University of Leeds. It was one of the first rounds of recruitment for new lectureships, but that also kind of consider research as part of the teaching. And I took that opportunity, and yeah, I'm here. This is my 10th year at the University of Leeds. So I have moved from research fellow to lecturer to associate professor, and now I am applying for my professorship. I am very, very grateful to my community, and this is the topic of today, isn't it? And my community, I am very grateful that they are here, or part of them are here, over there, the community of Black in Plant Science, which I brought with me, thankfully, to the money that I was given by Research Culture here at the University of Leeds. So yeah, that's my story. Thanks.
Is it working? Yeah.
Yep.
So you're quite a hard act to follow. So I'm Maria Hussain, lecturer in management here at the Leeds University Business School. I've been here for 5 years now. Can you believe it, Kendi? So Kendi and I kind of worked together before she went on to higher and better things, greener grass, let's say. But in terms of my journey and what I'm doing kind of so far, so institutionally, I'm the co-chair of the Muslim Staff Network, which is either the first, and we've had a conversation with the University of Manchester, who claim to be the first one, but we're still quite a small, I'd say, kind of intersectional community in terms of the EDI space. And that's something I'm quite passionate about, kind of advocating for, in terms of religion and faith actually being recognised as an intersection along with race. In terms of the other roles that I currently hold, so I was recently appointed to the EDI Committee for Chartered Association of Business Schools, which is a national committee from my professional, it's a professional body. And also I sit on the British Academy of Management Council as a co-opted member, and that is also a national body. In terms of my journey to academia, I would say kind of growing up, I said the first 5 years of my life, in the northeast of England, so not so glamorous, and then moving to Leeds. You know, thinking about, you know, your intersectional identity, and I would say kind of race and religion for myself. Religion, I would say kind of more so as a young adult, and then as a woman, kind of being foregrounded in terms of my experience, and also I guess the lens that I bring and my worldview as well, in terms of how I kind of interpret situations, and also kind of deal with, you know, the microaggressions that we all probably have faced in some way, everyone in the room. So that's kind of, I guess, where I've kind of come from. And in terms of thinking about kind of sustaining the change and also being able to include others without internalizing a lot of the negativity that you're subject to, whether you're a leader, emerging leader, or if you're, you know, kind of a junior member of staff or a student. For me, you know, having faith has really helped that, but also a northern mum. And for those of you that are from the north, you'll know what I mean. So our mum kind of used to say, kind of growing up, that there's no such word as can't. And you might think, well, that's quite toxic. But actually, you know, northern grit, I think, is something real. And I think that's kind of sustained me in some way. I think I've internalized that a little bit. So when I do kind of face a barrier, then, you know, it's something that I kind of think about in terms of, well, am I thinking about this in the best way? Is there another way of thinking about it? And relating to today's topic around networking and net worthing, I think that really speaks to that piece, that the more people you speak to, you connect with, you know, you can really understand how to overcome really entrenched systemic problems and challenges, and think about what you can actually bring to the conversation in terms of moving things along and sustaining small incremental changes. I think that's kind of a way I see of actually positively impacting the space, because it can feel, and let's be honest, really draining emotionally, personally, whether you're trying to lead a network, influence a space, or trying to influence upwards. And I think, you know, strategic representation is really the key to unpacking a lot of potential that is kind of locked away behind, you know, gatekeepers. So I think, you know, having access to those spaces, really advocating for that collectively is a safe way to do it, and also I think more of a sustainable way. So sorry for eating up more of the time, but up to you.
Hi everyone, so my name is OLUWASEUN. I'm a second year PhD student. I know I feel very humbled being amongst academics. But yeah, so I was born and raised in Nigeria, proudly Nigerian, and moved over to Ukraine and studied there for 2 years. That was the first time I experienced racism and like knew what it felt to be Black amongst other people, to be a minority. So that was a really interesting experience, made me stronger, and moved to the UK to study. I went to University of Southampton to study aerospace engineering. That was really fun. I did my master's there as well. And I moved up to Leeds about 2 years ago to do my PhD. And I'm really passionate about doing outreach. I go into local schools, so I work with the educational engagement team at the University of Leeds that helps to widen student participation. Yeah, I honestly love going to local schools and speaking to kids and, you know, trying to inspire them. So that has been something that is very actively part of my life, and I hope to continue to do. And I try as much as possible, obviously, to engage with people around campus as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Can you hear me? Cool. Hi, I'm Georgie Cox. I am an associate professor at the University of East London. Is that one better? Okay. I am an associate professor in nursing. I'm a Londoner, born and bred. Even that in itself was a bit of an oxymoron. People who didn't actually believe in being Black and British. I don't know, is that you? Okay, I'll try again. Okay. Karaoke. My karaoke is very good. I can karaoke in Polish, I'll let you know. By the way, I don't speak Polish. That's only when you had a little bit of, yeah, okay. I was born and raised in Brent, which is northwest London. So any Brent bandits out there that are online, woo! I had a little bit of an unusual childhood where I guess I didn't recognize that there was racism happening to me when I was about 7, 8 years old. I was a child who was always inquisitive, always asking questions. I always remember that one of my first teachers, she was Asian, Mrs. Jai Singh. I always remember her. She used to wear these beautiful saris with the gold jewelry, and I'd hear the bangles tinkle. You could ask her any question. That got replaced with a white tutor. I'm not going to say about the ethnic origin, but obviously she didn't like questions being asked. So if you asked too many questions as a young Black child, you got put outside. So one, been there? Yeah. So I think it was one day I'd said to my mom, I didn't want to go to school anymore. There was no point. I wasn't learning anything. Anyway, she managed to run into another friend from the Caribbean. She moved me to very quiet little private independent school. So a lot of these things that you're seeing out there where you're talking about, you're taught to network, you're taught to compete. There was a lot of that. So I actually had a really good upbringing, but I was always the only one in the village. In my school, I was the third Black child in the school. That was just the junior school. In the whole school, which had a senior section, I was the fifth Black child. So I kind of got used to being in the minority. It was only when I went to university at Westminster, it's a post-91, so it was a polytechnic to begin with, that suddenly I was surrounded by all my peers. To see some nods there. And that was just such a great experience. Even when I did nursing, it was, again, minoritized. Everything is taught through the European lens, the white European lens. And so I wanted to go into nursing, and it became my mission that when I became a tutor, I wanted to change that we had things through the Afro-Caribbean, the ethnic lens, because to this day, they still teach things like, and I don't know any of you know, blanching erythema. So if you all touch the top of your hand, press and release, does it go white and then come back in color? Yeah, I noticed that too. And so that was always one of my first questions. Well, you're teaching me how to assess white people. I'm in Northwest London, West Central London, high ethnic communities. How do I do that with Black people? And they couldn't tell me. So I moved into teaching, been 23 years now. Only moved to UEL last year because I think one of the things that we tend to do, especially as a woman, you have your kids, you stay in an area, and I think sometimes that's detrimental to us. And I think, is it a book or something? Think Like a White Man. If you need to move, don't stay where you're denigrated. Move to where you're celebrated, and then maybe you can make that next step.
Good morning, everyone. My name is KAMYAR, and I'm currently Professor of Drug Discovery at the University of West London, specializing in developing new cancer drugs. For my story, I'm going to take you back 100 years ago in Iran, the country that I was born, and to my grandparents. My grandfather was a baker, very humble background, but my grandmother realized that education was the best tool for social mobility. So my mother and her sisters were amongst the very few women who actually started being educated and go to school, and my mother finished school, and as a result of that, she became an independent woman. She had her own job, which was very unusual in those days. And that theme of recognizing education for empowerment and being able to move you through social strata is something that was carried out, because then my parents decided to send me to UK after the revolution in Iran. I came here, studied for my A-levels first, then I managed to get to Imperial College, and after I finished my first degree, I was very fortunate to be awarded a scholarship to study and also funding from British Petroleum to study for my PhD. I did that, and then I went to the United States to Johns Hopkins University. I came back. I was, again, very fortunate to be given a position at a company called Glaxo, now GSK, that I'm sure many people have heard of. And then I left them after 2 years to start my academic career, first at King's College, and then I moved to University of Bradford, where I was the head of medicinal chemistry at the Institute of Cancer Therapeutics. And then about a year ago, I moved back to London, the University of West London, to my current position.
Is that working now? Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I've been instructed to stand right here. Otherwise, those online cannot see me. but it's more important they hear rather than see, right? And these are the VIPs, so they don't really need to see me, but I'm obedient, I'll obey. Anyway, so thank you so much for, sharing your journey, how you've got to here. Diverse routes you have taken, and I'm sure almost every person in this room will identify with at least one of those routes or part of the story that you have shared with us. But more importantly, we know that you being here cannot have been a very direct, or I woke up, I liked it, and here I am now because I had a great teacher. There is more, as Maria alluded to, there are challenges that we face in the academy. So I'll invite you to share some of those. What challenges have you experienced on your journey? And perhaps give us a hint in terms of how you have overcome or are overcoming some of those challenges, right? Who would like to start? I see Maria is ready, so let's start with Maria.
Mentioned that there are challenges to to being promoted. There are promotion gaps. We know that that's similar to awarding gaps when we're thinking about students. And this idea of creating a pipeline, so from the PhD student right through to professorship, is, it's on the mind of a lot of VCs and also kind of across the sector. But thinking about the current pipeline and, thinking and reflecting on experiences within the academy at the moment, my own experience and anecdotally colleagues that I speak to regularly as a co-chair, an institutional co-chair of an EDI network. And I think, when we think about kind of promotion criteria, and if you've looked at any, I'm sure leadership is something that comes up quite a bit, regardless of the route that you might take to becoming, an associate professor or a full professor. So really, I think for me, one of the main obstacles is how do you actually get leadership experience and be able to evidence that in a way that speaks to, the organizational culture. And we know that there is a lot of work going on around that, especially when we're thinking about, foregrounding collaboration over, competition. But there is, the nature of academia in any large organization, they're competitive organizations and they want the best talent. And that's in relation to, the structures we know impede some talent from being noticed. So how do you actually get leadership experience under your belt where you might feel in your particular context, you're not even seen, you're invisible, to quote you, Brightness. How do you become visible when actually you're hyper visible, in some ways, but when it comes to those competitive opportunities that are really developmental in terms of your promotion, your career trajectory, how do you get those really important opportunities under your belt? And my advice would be, start from kind of what you can, where you can actually move. So think about critically the gaps within your own kind of experience, and think also in relation to the networks that you're already tapped into. And if you're not, then that's a clear sign that you need to start networking, not just within your own kind of bubble. And we do all, we're all guilty of working within silos, but think more strategically and maybe think outside of your organization. So for me, it was, kind of stepping up, I guess, in terms of becoming a co-chair. And that was an institutional opportunity that I kind of forged in a way myself. And there is kind of a piece of work happening now around how that kind of space will kind of be more professionalized. So with that it becomes more visible, it becomes recognized as an actual institutional voice. And in terms of the work that's kind of been done by the group and how that's influencing upwards, we've been able to actually strategically influence the EDI strategy of the university. Externally, we've also been able to collaborate with other universities and other similar EDI networks that sit outside of academia. So then, you know, if you think about the impact of that, you're able to impact your influence not only in your kind of bubble, but externally. And that will speak to, you know, how you are leading, but it'll evidence what you're doing in an impactful way. So I'd say that's a really good thing. Also, in terms of, again, thinking strategically, thinking outside of the box, outside of your bubble, and, you know, networking with people that may not, you know, look really similar to you, but may think similarly to you. So if you are able to connect with colleagues who can either, you know, informally mentor you or, you know, formally do that, that's going to be great, because they'll be able to give you insider knowledge that can, you know, help you, you know, make the most efficient use of your time. And that's also something that you need to think about. How are you going to sustain the work that you're doing? And you will inevitably have to say no to things, which I find really difficult. So that's also something you need to bear in mind. You know, are you overstretching yourself? Think about, you know, where you want to be impactful, and really, you know, strategically align yourself with that, and put your time behind it. So think of your time as, you know, kind of money. I have a coach who said, think about it in that way. And maybe you'll think about when you're saying yes to something a little bit more before you say yes. And it might seem a bit of a crude way of thinking about time, but I think that makes it a little bit realer to us. If you're already overstretched and you're saying yes to lots of things, and you are actually being unkind to the person that you're saying you'll be able to, you know, help or collaborate with, but is there a better way of you actually bringing that person in to what you're already doing to, you know, provide that support or, you know, that collaboration opportunity? So thinking, you know, beyond your kind of next step, think a few steps ahead, I think would be my advice.
Thank you very much, Maria. Georgie or YOSELIN?
You want to go first? Yes, go first.
Yeah, they're negotiating among themselves. Okay, YOSELIN.
So, yeah, okay. So I saw that was really insightful and covered a lot of stuff, like saying no is for me a very difficult thing to do. I think that was one of the challenges. I think that I had experience just from different areas, very different challenges. And I think that one of the challenges has been also myself. So I'm a person of, I can't do it. I must do it. I must go ahead and do it. If no one is doing it, I have to do it. So I am not a person to rely on others. And that sometimes can play against me, evidently, because because I don't have time for anything anymore. But I mean, to give you a little story, because I think that sometimes stories are actually the things that people connect with, you know. So when I started the University of Leeds, you know, after this long career, because research is not a short career, you finally get your position. So I was here, it was my second year being already a lecturer in the faculty. And I came into a gathering that was for saying goodbye to one of the deans or the directors in the faculty. And when I arrived, it was a little late because I am Cuban and Cubans are always late. But when I arrived a bit late, the first comment that was directed to me is, oh, we must start, you know, cleaning up. And I was so surprised that I just say, I am not your cleaner, and turn around and left. I couldn't even talk. You know, it was like a damn freeze moment that happened, and you cannot even react to it. But immediately after that, I am like, you know, I cannot be in a faculty in which when they see me suddenly I am the cleaner. So few months after that, it was announced that there was this EDI coordinator position at the faculty to direct the EDI strategy. And I put my hands up. I am like, I want to do that. I want to drive the EDI strategy here. And I want to understand, I mean, how I can, because I cannot work in a place in which people are treated like this. So that's my little story of my own challenge. How I solve my challenge is to then look behind the scene, what is happening, and how this, how I can implement solutions. So I am a person of doing. So I drove a lot of the strategy that is currently in the faculty. I don't know if that helps anyone because I don't think that we are short for time, really. We have a lot of other commitments. But yeah, that's my story.
Thanks, Yoselin. And I too love stories, and I think I could see or hear from the audience real connection to what you just shared. Thank you for that. Georgie.
I think two things. One of the things that I was told was at my previous university that I needed to get out of my department because I was very isolated, and everything that I was doing, it was all about nursing and the nursing department. And my dean at the time said to me, Georgie, you need to get out of the department. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what does she mean I need to get out of the department? I'm a nurse. I teach nursing. I teach everything to do with nursing. I don't know anything else but nursing. How can I get out of the department? So time went on, and our students were the galvanizing thing where they noticed how awards were being given. And this was out of another friend's piece of research. And so we started the EDI committees. And then from our EDI committee, because we were at the time something like 85% of a Black cohort that we had coming in, a lot of the tutors looked like me. That's an enormous strength. So we created this network. And then we started networking around the university. So one of the first things I would say, don't do things in isolation. Do it as a co-op, do it as a group, reach out to other people. There are other little pockets and silos around the place. And then as soon as I started networking out with other people, and then this flood of information and this flurry of people then started contacting us, and we were talking to other departments, and then we were invited on other committees that we didn't know were happening before because we weren't exposed to it. Don't also get caught up then in the busyness of work, because the busyness of work, as lovely Marcia Wilson said to me, do it because it's of benefit to you. Don't always say yes. I'm a nurse, we say yes to everything because that's the way we're brought up in the hierarchy. But what that opened up for me and many others, the doors of networking with people. And it really is important. I have business cards, by the way. And I think that being able to say no and being firm, don't just say, oh no, and then they come back to you and well, we can really put it on your workload. Be firm, use your unions if you need to. And I would say the other thing that I learned, especially with how nursing was, because before you worked in nursing, you became a sister, then you transferred from the ward across to the School of Nursing, but now we're in the higher education, and it's a little bit different. I think what I also learned was pick your battles really carefully. There's no point picking the battle to lose the battle and then go ahead and lose the war. There's no point. And sometimes it does feel like that, a battlefield. And remember, there are allies out there, lots of allies. You just need to utilize them, I think, and that's really important. So mine was always a bit meandering, and maybe it's not the straight direct for you, that route. Take a walk on the wild side. You'll be surprised what you find.
Indeed. It seldom is ever a straight line, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you for that, Georgie. OLUWASEUN, you said something that I really do relate with, in the sense that even I didn't know I was Black until I landed on these shores. And then one day someone, KENDI, African KENDI, had to meet Black KENDI. It was an interesting day. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the challenges that you have faced.
Yeah, it just becomes so real to you when obviously you grew up in Africa and then you move somewhere else, then people look at you differently. You're on the bus and then people try to obviously scooch away, which is, difficult. But I think one of the challenges is you question your identity, who you are as a person, what you stand for. And personally, I think my faith helped me quite a lot, working through some of these challenges and just knowing who I am as a person. And I think for me, that was sort of the biggest thing I can relate to, that really helped me throughout that process. And just, having my community as well is so important. Having people that understand you, that know where you're coming from, that can relate to your experiences, I think it's so powerful. And everywhere because I've moved quite a lot into quite a lot of places, I think the first thing I always try to do is just find my community and find people I can trust and I can speak to about anything. And I think it's the same thing here as well, where I'm trying to find a group of people from similar backgrounds and just, sometimes you just need to rant, and that's just having those people around you is just extremely valuable. Yeah.
Fantastic. So underscoring the importance of community once again, and it's interesting that you and Maria also echo what Brightness said about faith, and faith being something that a lot of minoritized ethnic people find comfort in and find community in, and a sense of purpose, and that place where you don't have to explain yourself. You can just be. That's really interesting. So, Kamyar, you've been in different institutions, and so you will have had vast experiences, some of them similar, some of them different. What challenges would you be able to share with us, and perhaps some insight into how you are overcoming them?
Thank you. So I think I share quite a lot of the experiences that other people on the panel had. And as an overseas student and somebody who came from a different background to the vast majority of the people who were my peers, it's the sense of belonging, the fact that you don't feel you should be here, and sort of recognizing that you do actually need to be here because you are as clever as everybody else, you are as capable of everybody else. But the system doesn't really allow that. One of the things I remember, my PhD was a very supportive guy, by the way, was that he once said to me, "Oh, Kamyar, I actually consider you one of us." And that distinction between us and you was a very, very strange thing. As you said, I had a very long career in academia, and if I was to reflect on what we can do in order to make life better for early career BME students, I'm going to reflect on what Bernadine said earlier today about mentoring. I think mentoring is the single most important thing for helping early career researchers. I've been fortunate enough to mentor 3 academics, 1 woman and 2 from my ethnic minority background. It is very rewarding for me, but it's also, I hope, it's been good for them to have somebody to tell them that their experience is not unique and how they can navigate through the academic maze that what was referred to earlier on. So I think mentoring is very important. And related to that, I don't think academic mentoring actually currently takes into account the mentor's knowledge of EDI issues or sustainability issues. We do actually now, at least in my university, train them for very specific issues related to women, but we don't really train them for issues which are specifically related to EDI. So I think there needs to be a much more strict framework on what mentors can do and their knowledge and how they can help their mentorees. So that's one of the things that I would say. The other thing that I would say is that, as was one of the very interesting things that Simone mentioned, was how academia is and what it should be. The drive for publication, ignoring teaching and things like that. One of the things that I would say to all early career academics, regardless of the background, is to define your own success. Academic success is a very strict set of criteria. Just ignore that. That's just BS. Just define your own success and excel in what you want. The other advice I give my young self is don't stand for any sort of racism at all. Stop it there and then. As soon as you see it, call it out. And just don't call it out to the person, call it out to everybody else who's there to hear. Because the only way you can fight that is by showing that this is wrong and it shouldn't. So don't be compromising about that. Obviously, we heard from Brightness about how challenging it can be in the environment where whistleblowing and things like that are not allowed. But don't be afraid of that. Call it out. And as Georgia mentioned, there are always people out there who are supporting you and understand what your point of view is. So I would say those are the most important things for early career.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kamyar. And I can identify with all of those as well. It's interesting when Bernadine was going through the themes of the conferences that they have had so far. And there was a lot about staying in the academy, right? And we've moved from surviving to staying and now to thriving. And interestingly as well, we heard about the way in which when you were talking, Brightness, about the individual, the micro, and all the way to the macro, and how it is the institutions that need to change, the systems that need to change. We don't need fixing. There is nothing wrong with us, but the institutions need to change and the systems need to change. They are taking a long time to change though. And whilst they are, hence the need for us to learn how to navigate whilst we change. The two go hand in hand. If we wait for them to change for us to thrive, I'm afraid we'll be waiting for a hell of a long time. So we've got to thrive and navigate them and perhaps be the influence, be the change that we want to see perhaps. And I love what you have said about calling out racism, because anti-racism is not just white people work. Anti-racism is everybody's work. So we too are called to be anti-racist, to be active against racism. So this is an opportunity when I open it up to anybody who has a question to invite more story from the panel.
Can I just say one other thing before we go to that, just very shortly?
Of course, whilst I take,
emphasizing what you were saying, actually. I think one of the important things is to also realize that the hierarchy in the universities have got a very important role to play. You already heard from Bernadine about the support that she's received, and we heard from Simone very eloquently addressing some of the issues. I think it is very important to make sure that the hierarchy of the higher education, the senior people within higher education, do actively pursue these goals, because they can change policy, they can change the way the academic success is considered, and also through that they can percolate that down to the other members of the university. So I think that the vice chancellors actually do play a very important role, and senior managers.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, go on. Perfect, thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you very much. My name is Bakita Kasala. I'm a health researcher at the University of Oxford, and in a few months I'm going to start a PhD there, focused on co-production in health research. So many of you have spoken about mentoring, so I wanted to ask, thinking about it practically, how does one maximize that mentor-mentee relationship in terms of like initiating the relationship, and how might mentees steer and assess the quality of that relationship after they've connected with a mentor? if you could speak maybe on your own personal experiences of making the most of that relationship, either as a mentee or as a mentor. Thank you.
Maybe Kamyar?
So I think in terms of mentoring, it is important that the mentor has got some sort of a personalized connection with the journey that the mentoree is carrying out. But of course, one of the things that we've already said is that the numbers just don't match up. If you sort of wanted to have, for example, a Black mentor for a Black early career researcher, you just will not be able to ever increase the number of Black early career researchers being mentored, because the numbers at the top are very little. So the way I would say it is that it needs to be formalized within universities' structures, and we need better training for mentors. And it should be much more, at the moment, mentoring is really focusing on how you write proposals, how do you organize your teaching. These are which are very practical, but it needs to also expand to other areas. And for that, the mentors need to be trained.
So adding to that, I will say one thing. You don't have to have one mentor. You can have many, many mentors. And I think that I can count, I have about 10 in my during my career that has helped me in different aspects. So your mentor is not one person that just kind of follow you from the beginning to the end. There are people that in different aspects of your career and your growth can contribute. And some of them might be people that looks like you. Some of them are people that are not like you, but that they provide you with another aspect in your life. Or perhaps it's in the research context, it perhaps is in mock interviews. So I do have a variety of mentors from different career stages. I am also mentored by my mentees all the time. I learn from them, and I think that is important for when you become a mentor, or if you are already a mentor, to listen to your mentee, because they can teach you quite a lot about how to mentor, and you become better mentor every time that you mentor someone.
Thank you, YOSELIN. That's a really good point. I think especially the early career researchers, and so starting out in your careers, remember you have something to offer too. Mentoring should be a relationship where both parties gain, you know, so remember you are bringing something into the room as well. And I couldn't agree more about stepping out and looking for people who are in the spaces you want to occupy, knowing that because we are minoritized, it is highly likely that the people you find there don't look like you. That shouldn't stop you from reaching out to them. We'll take another question.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Osita Mokocha, and I want to thank YOSELIN and the Black and Plant Science community for making it possible for me to be here.
Thank you. Hey, Black and Plant Science.
Yeah. So my question is kind of trying to rethink the whole process of evaluation. So is it possible for, you guys that are already established in the system to try and reevaluate the process of trying to bring in new people in? Because it looks like the process is fixed and there's no room for flexibility. So many things has to follow a particular way. It's either this way or not. And that has kind of created a very big disadvantage, because someone might not necessarily have that which you think you want, but has some other things that, if given that opportunity, can in the long run make a lot of sense, that you look back and say, thank God I took a chance. So one of the things my PhD supervisor said to me the day I did my PhD Viva was, I am glad I actually responded to your email. And that meant a lot to me, because I remember writing to tons of supervisors in Nigeria and I got ignored. But this only person that decided to reply to my email turned out to be one of the key influencers to where I am today. So I want to throw this out, and I want to open up the minds of the senior academics and the researchers to try and see if it's possible to be more flexible in the process of trying to recruit new people, because this system of trying to follow a particular pattern doesn't really give the end result at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's a question about how rigid our processes can be and whether we can broaden them and diversify them. So whilst you're thinking about that question, we'll take a second one. I'll come that way as well. Don't worry, I'm trying to go section by section. So I'll come here. So bear that in mind. And I think this one is yours.
So I have a question. I'll introduce myself. My name is Precious. I am a PhD student researching on Black African experiences in the UK for international and home students. I also work within the sector in race and leadership. I have to ask, whose responsibility is to change the system? So when you all gave your profiles, a lot of you spoke about being EDI co-chairs or EDI members and so on and so forth. And there's always an assumed, initially when I was working, it was, okay, there's an interest. Would you like to do this? And you say, okay, yeah, I'm interested in improving the way things are for myself and people that look like me. And then it goes on to an assumed responsibility where you're kind of tapped and said, this is going on. It's assumed that you should be part of it. So I think I just want to ask, whose responsibility is it then really to improve the system? Does it fall on the people who it impacts? Or should it be a wider commitment from the organization or the systems to change it?
Fantastic. So two related questions. Okay, so we'll get responses and then move on.
First of all, to the gentleman who was asking about the changing the processes, sometimes even at our level, and I'm like associate professor, it comes higher up. So it's usually more at the UEB, so the university exec level, where those happens, and maybe with the professors. It happens. I can say that I have seen I've seen the gateposts change from when I came in, where you were a lecturer, senior lecturer. I'm going to show my age, and I'm principal lecturer. And suddenly we had associate professors and professors. I think the gateways, they do shift and they move, but I don't think we very often don't have that power or authority to change them. But then I think that's also something that you just need to keep going back to them on and questioning and go through the unions, because they also have a huge input in that as to whether or not certain things and changes that are made are acceptable. So can't help, but we just got to keep trying. In your case with the EDI, in your case with the EDI, where I started at this is my third university, so at my second university, we started as a response to the student body and what they were seeing. And from us, it just really mushroomed that we were the only faculty in health that actually had a really strong EDI commitment. And this was before we all sat and watched the horrendous 2020 George Floyd thing that went on television, which really shook everything and everyone. And then from there, it started to just mushroom out, because suddenly they were aware of us and what we were doing. So in my case, I would say we created our niche. We started knocking on the doors and telling people they needed to sit up and listen to what their students were saying, but how can we help our students if you're not doing something to try and help us? And then the flip side came, oh, such and such is happening, you should go to this. I think you go if you feel that it's going to help you. And if you're not feeling it, don't go.
Yes, Lynn?
I wanted to say something to Osita. So there is there is this will and wish that I want to help people like me, you know. And yes, there is always a passion to interact and to support people like me to come through the system. But sometimes it's just not feasible to answer absolutely every mail that you receive because they pile up in your desktop, and there is as much time as, in the day as you can have. And sometimes I think that this comes back to mentoring, you know. If you are a young researcher for your community, if you want to talk to them, it's about mentoring. How do you actually approach these positions and these opportunities? And sometimes it's, when we are reading CVs or reading letters of support or emails, we are not looking at the race, really. We are looking about, you know, how this fits the work profile. And sometimes it's just about the way in which certain skills are phrased. And we all know that we, as a minoritized community, we need help in producing our CVs and in producing our letters of support to appeal the wider majority. Unfortunately, that's the case. And it's something that we cannot fix because we actually have hundreds of applications, and it's very difficult to single out, okay, I'm gonna give the opportunity to this person, although their CV is not showing up the skills that we need for this specific position. So I think that mentoring is again coming to the question. You know, if you have colleagues out there that want to get positions in the UK, get a mentor from the UK and to actually review their applications and see how they feel the profile that they are applying.
Thank you, YOSELIN. So in view of time, what I'm gonna do, we have 1, 2, 3 questions, which I will take, and there's online as well. So what I'm gonna do, I'll go around and we'll hear all the questions, the 3 questions and those online. And then I think the last word, I will give it again to our keynote speaker to just tell us one final word. Yeah, she wasn't expecting that. I can see her looking on the side. Okay.
Thanks, Kendi. Thank you, panel. My name's Kat Davis. I'm the Dean for Research Culture at the university here. I went to an event at Bradford University recently, and Professor Udi Archibong there really for the first time helped me understand that increased weight of emotional labour for minoritized colleagues. She really gave me a useful definition of emotional labour as having to manage or control the way you present to fit with the impression management of the institution. And that really, really resonated with me of just how exhausting that must be. So I guess my question is what can we do as senior leaders to reduce that emotional labour burden?
That's a really good question. And I think it goes back to your question as well. So I am making my way down. Do you want to shout one from online whilst I walk this way?
The 2 questions about mentoring. One is, do we think that reverse mentoring is more effective? And then the second question is, does age really matter for effective mentoring? Does the mentor necessarily have to be older than the mentee for it to be effective?
Okay, my name is Tony Seiler Holloman. I graduated from the University of Leeds 2020. And I've started a business with my wife, Tiffany here, educational services, B-side professional services. I have a question. Now, Brightness said that she was a rebel rascal. There are a lot of people in this room and in the university system who are more like me, a little bit of an introvert, quiet, they want to work behind the scenes. How do we establish ourselves and integrate into networks? And what is our place? How can we really affect change.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tony. And across over here, I'm getting my steps in, right?
I am extremely nervous. My name is Arinze Phillips. I'm a Caribbean background with a Igbo first name. And I want to know, because there's disparities between credibility of researchers between Global North and Global South, do you find that being an ethnic minority in the Global North when it comes to your work? And my mother gave me an English middle name to get a job. And I want to know, when it comes to academia, have you ever tried to anglicize your name or use your Anglo name if you have one? And what do you think about that?
Wow, that's deep. Yeah. Some of us have got our names we go by, and then we've got our, what do they call them? Not official name. What do they call them? Government name. Yeah. There you go. All right. So if the panelists could speak to any question that speaks to them. Yes, go on.
First. So I'd like to answer Kat's question. As a co-chair of an EDI network, you're more than welcome to come and meet the network. I think in terms of the emotional burden, and I would call it a burden, not just necessarily that kind of starts at the university gates, but it's reflective of society, unfortunately. I think recognition of that would be great. And what would that look like in terms of the organizational culture? So when we're thinking about, how, if we look at the data around kind of promotions, for example, and what that means to colleagues that are less represented in terms of how quickly they're able to go through the ranks, for example, and what are the steps that need to be in place? Who are the key stakeholders in helping that particular journey, especially if colleagues, as we know, are carrying around this additional burden. So I think really engaging with different stakeholders that possibly aren't part of your either social circle or professional circle, especially as you go up the career ladder, diversity is more or less absent or invisible, especially at kind of the board level. So I'd say really engage with a variety of stakeholders. I think networks are really well placed to inform that strategic conversation. And in terms of actually, designing resilient structures rather than expecting staff to just be more resilient. So I think that would be the message I would give to kind of leaders that, are wanting to change things, but really, as Julia, our dean, mentioned, you need to speak to those people that are living it day in, day out, if you want to really make a change that will be impactful. The lived experience, I think, is really powerful, but essentially it's the structures that, will help to change the situation. So being part of that conversation, I think, would be really key to sustaining it too.
Thanks, Maria. And anecdotally, when Julia talked about some women of color who marched into her office a few years ago, Maria and I were two of those women, and change has come. I shall say no more.
The online question about reverse mentoring. I've done reverse mentoring, did it with a VC and another friend, and we also had like a student representative. The VC that we worked with at the time was really interested in the whole EDI because it was something I'd never experienced. And it actually gave him insight for things that we go through every day. One of my colleagues, she was a lovely Muslim student, and she spoke about when things were happening, when there was a lot of racism, Islamophobia, where they were throwing things through car windows, acids, etc., and how when she drove up to traffic lights, she had to consciously then think and remember to put her windows up because this was happening. And our VC said he'd never had a day where he'd had to think or even worry about, was somebody going to throw something through his window, because it was something he never experienced. He was older than us, but all of us were younger than him. So he really looked to us as like being almost like the sounding board, the thermometer of what was actually going on in the university. And we kept having those meetings long past when the reverse mentoring happened. So I think it's a good thing because it actually keeps them in touch. And also it keeps the VC grounded, I think, of what's really happening in amongst the faculty, in amongst the student body as well. In answer to your question about the names, I had a funny experience. I'd gone away on holiday, and I'm not going to mention the country, but all I would say is that if you're Black and you go out there and you have an English name, it really freaks them out. Okay, because they look at you and they say, and your surname, where does that come from? And I was going to do the intake of breath and say, well, you know, my slave masters from back in the 1600s, they gave those to me. And my friend just went, Georgie, we need to get home to England. And so my answer became, I don't know. So where are your grandparents from? And of course I told them it was the West Indies. I said Barbados. Well, West Indies, they didn't understand. That's the other thing. There is something going around now where they don't understand the term the West Indies. I know what that means. I guess most of you in the room know what that means. I went, Barbados, and they went, at which point I was like, oh my God, they've never heard of Barbados. So I'm thinking, how can you be asking me these questions if actually you actually have no knowledge of what it is of somebody who is Black and British. Black and American, so African American, they can get with. African British, ooh, So in the end, one of my friends, who's white Irish, yelled across, the Caribbean. And she went, oh, yes, yes. And I said, that was just me, I couldn't help myself. I said, I bet she just watched Pirates of the Caribbean at the weekend. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And usually, because a lot of people earlier used to call me George, so George Cox, they would always expect white, male, and yeah.
Interesting.
Here you go. I'm gonna shut up now.
Come here. Would you like to come in?
Well, first of all, it was nice to hear Uday's name mentioned, because she's actually an unsung hero at University of Bradford. And I sort of having worked with her is probably too much of an statement, but having known what she has achieved at University of Bradford, I think that is really fantastic on what she's done. And I guess that brings me to something else about higher levels of university. So I am middle management when it comes to university, not as high up as vice chancellors, 2 or 3 rungs below those, 1 or 2 below those. But I think it's important to realize that although we heard very good things about Simone, and we know, I know that she is doing a lot, that is not actually universal. Not all universities, although they do talk about EDI, they don't actually have got very active programs to promote it. And I think that is very sad. And that, again, as was mentioned, putting pressure so that is actually brings to the forefront of the university's workings and the way they operate is very important. In terms of what middle management do, I am a huge fan of positive action. I was really horrified by seeing what is going on in the United States in terms of what they have done. It's going to roll back equality, race equality in the United States by decades, by not allowing universities to be able to make contextualized offers to students. In much earlier career researches, I mean, I think it is important for universities to be able to make contextualized offers to students coming to university and have systems to support. And that is something that middle management can sort of put in action. And I hope we are successful in that in the long run.
Thank you very much. I think we do need to wind up, but I'm aware that Tony's question has not been answered. So, YOSELIN?
you were asking about not being outgoing and outspoken as HIV. I say my answer will be find your voice, and to every one of the students and early career researcher here. And sometimes your voice doesn't mean to be the loudest one in the room. Sometimes it doesn't mean to be the happiest one in the room, but just find a way to communicate. And sometimes, I mean, this kind of pandemic somehow have given us also the chance to communicate online and through social networks. So find your social network and find a way to talk about your needs and about your experiences through your social network. Or it can be connecting to networks like there are many, the female professors, the other networks. Just find your community and the way to communicate your needs and find your voice.
Great, thank you. I hope that's helpful, Tony. I think all the questions that we haven't had time to take a real deep dive, but we have 4 workshops later on today where we will be taking a deep dive into some of these issues. So please bring those unanswered questions and bring the answers too, because it's a space where we co-create and share with each other. Each and every one of us has something to teach, and each one of us has an opportunity to learn, okay? Oluwaseun, you haven't said anything. Do you want to say one last thing before we close?
So I guess just to what the last question, I think sometimes you have to go out of your comfort zone to do what is right. And
absolutely.
Personally, I'm very introverted. I don't know why I'm here. But I know that, you know, I could possibly, someone could relate to me, and I know it's for good. So I would, you know, I'm happy to do it and look past and push myself. So, and I think I want to encourage people as well, because one of the things I found at uni is people are, especially ethnic minority people, are less inclined to do outreach. I don't know why. And I just want to encourage people to, you know, to go to schools, to, you know, to be involved. And because there's clearly a problem, and we need to do something about it. Talking can't get us anywhere, action will, and just be involved and be involved in communities and building communities. And I think that's the way we can make huge progress. That's what I'd say.
Absolutely, very well said. Very well said. And in terms of doing EDI work, somebody's got to do it. And I think, in a sense, a lot of us are the trailblazers, and we need to step into these spaces and design them how we want them, because we are the ones who know the change that we want, and we need to learn how to demand that change and to co-create those spaces so that others who come after us don't have to do the work that we are having to do, the emotional labor that Kat talked about. Somebody has got to do it, I'm afraid, and it just happens to be us, you know? So the last word, then we can go for lunch, I think.
Thank you very much. From my side, I just want to say we are the ones that we've been waiting for. So be the change that you want to see. And I also want to touch on, especially as BME, how do we begin to decolonize the curriculum? Because the project of decoloniality, it's not about excluding, it's about inclusivity. How do we ensure that we bring the voices? And for me, as we do research, let's remember that the scholarship is not just discipline scholarship that we need to do. I'm listening to you as a PhD candidate. You're talking about a lot of work that you're doing with your community. How do you begin to turn that into the scholarship? Because that is the message that we should be conveying. That is driving the change, but people are not aware of the change that you are doing. Mentorship is very key. And I loved what you say. Unfortunately, with universities, they say the mentorship is informal. So we need to begin to formalize mentorship. And also in the process of formalizing mentorship, we need to train not just mentors, but also mentees. Because I believe you don't know what you don't know as a mentee. But when you go through the training process, you begin to understand what is it that I need to reflect into. And for me, another important part, I hear we're talking so much about mentorship. I would love also a conversation about coaching, because the mentorship is about, I always say, standing on the shoulders of the giant, someone who has walked the walk. But again, it's not about where I want to be. The where I want to be, it's also informed about who am I as a person. And I believe coaching plays a very imperative role, because once you begin to see yourself and understand yourself, and I think it was you who say, I began to question my identity. Who am I? So the process of going through coaching, it's also about beginning to be authentic as a person. And beyond being authentic is to now say, how do I show up? You decide your agenda, not allow the system to set the tone of your agenda on how you are supposed to show up. But importantly, in this journey, if you want to win, you need to be intentional of every step that you take. Thank you.
Do you see why I wanted her to have the last word? So thank you once again. And thanks you, Bernadine, for giving us this opportunity to continue growing this community. Pay it forward. Wherever you go, try and continue growing the community. We are here at Leeds today. A few weeks ago, Tiffany had us over at Bradford, which was an amazing, amazing opportunity. I met two beautiful young ladies over here from Rara who are working with high schools, because the problem is not just in higher education. We need to have this conversation with the younger ones as well, so that they know how to take up space when they come into these, into higher education, right? So thank you so much. Thank you to our amazing panelists. Round of applause. And thank you also to our online audience for being so patient with us with microphones that have been, technology.